The BIS even said that global financial conditions eased this summer because equities went up and credit spreads tightened. In other words, the markets themselves become the stimulus. We're now in a loop where bad news means more cuts, more liquidity, and then higher prices. So bad news is kind of good news. Weak jobs data, market rallies. Slowing economy, more easing. Every data miss just feeds the next leg higher. That's the inversion that we're seeing. The economy used to drive the markets. Now the markets drive the economy. Today, corporations are the biggest buyer of their own stock. About $1 trillion in buybacks just this year alone. Not consumers, not foreign investors, companies using cheap capital to push their own stock prices higher. Now, the Fed provides the liquidity. Wall Street channels it through corporate balance sheets, and stock prices keep going up. Even the central bank's researchers admitted the programs like the Bank Term Funding Program lowered perceived bank risk, right? It was never about fixing the system. It was never about fixing the fundamentals. It was about protecting consumer confidence in the story, in the belief, because belief itself is now the policy tool, right? Today, just 7 companies control more than 30% of the entire S&P 500. And analysts keep raising their year-end targets because of AI enthusiasm and easing Fed policy. Again, it's not earnings doing this, it's narrative. This is the new model: belief, liquidity, markets, and production. That's why I call it a fiat market, right? Because just like our money, it's backed by confidence, not collateral. As long as the story holds, the system stays alive, which is why I've been making video after video for the last at least several years warning the danger now isn't a crash down. It's not a deflationary crash that most people are thinking of, but rather it's a crash up. Too much liquidity chasing too little substance. We have basically capital flooding into the last narrative standing. And while everyone keeps waiting for the crash down, what we're getting is the crash up, right? It's the grand finale of the belief era. Because when you look at what's actually happening right now, the Fed's cutting rates, they're halting QT. Liquidity is flooding back in, and we have trillions of dollars in buybacks happening. So it's hard not to see where this goes next. The same forces that inflated the bubble, they're now trying to keep the bubble alive. And when a system runs on belief and liquidity, the end never comes as a crash down, all right? But this isn't some magical fairy tale ending. Let's be clear about this. This thing has 2 failure points. First, there's a liquidity crisis that could potentially happen if the Fed decides to pull the liquidity away, right? Then the engine starts to sputter out. We just saw how fragile it is. The Fed had to pause its balance sheet runoff to stop liquidity from evaporating. The BIS even said, right, the market